We begin with the latest in the fragile ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran, as both sides say they are prepared for fighting to resume. President Trump says he is previewing Iran's latest peace plan, but in a post on Truth Social, Trump implied the proposal would be DOA, saying Iran has, quote, not yet paid a big enough price for what they have done to humanity and the world over the last 47 years. The president also left open the possibility of resuming military strikes. This is, of course, after the president said the war was terminated in a letter to Congress on Friday. On the Iranian side, a senior foreign diplomat who's been linked to negotiations told MS Now contributor Inzamam Rashid that officials are bracing for further conflict, saying Iran is, quote, preparing to be attacked again. At the same time, the White House continues to insist the 60-day deadline for Congress to approve the war doesn't apply because the conflict terminated when the U.S. and Iran entered a ceasefire, even as U.S. forces continue to enforce a naval blockade in the Strait of Hormuz, which most experts would tell you is an act of war. And when the president was pressed on that contradiction last night, his answer raised even more questions.
In your letter to Congress, you said the hostilities in Iran that started have been terminated. How can you say that given that the naval blockade is still being militarily enforced?
Well, it's a very friendly blockade. Nobody's even challenging it. Nobody at all is challenging it. Just so you understand, many presidents have been involved in things that are very big. They never had to go through anything with respect to Congress. They considered it to be totally unconstitutional.
Joining us now, Elise Labott, host of Cosmopolitics on Substack, such a good name, and Catherine Thompson, senior fellow in defense and foreign policy at the Cato Institute and former senior Trump administration official at the Pentagon under Pete Hegseth. Thank you both for joining us. Catherine, I feel like you're a unicorn. We have been wanting to see and talk to someone who had worked under...
I was chatting her up in makeup. I'm like,
there will be a Cosmopolitics, I assume, with Catherine involved.
Yes, absolutely.
You worked with Pete Hegseth, under Pete Hegseth in this defense department. The Atlantic is reporting that Vance is privately questioning whether or not the Pentagon is giving him information. In closed-door meetings, J.D. Vance has repeatedly questioned the Defense Department's depiction of the war in Iran and whether the Pentagon has understated what appears to be the drastic depletion of U.S. missile stockpiles. You have the Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, weeks ago saying, in reporting, being concerned, apparently, that the White House, the administration, was giving the president a more rosy view of what's going on there. When you were at the Defense Department, did you get any indication that it is not safe or be careful with giving President Trump bad news or the true view of hostilities?
So I worked in the policy shop and in my remit, right, like, you know, stockpile consideration, readiness considerations, trade-offs with other theaters. I mean, this is the bread and butter of what policy does, and in particular in the development of the defense strategy. And so that's kind of the impetus or the reason that we did a more prioritized national defense strategy, which is definitely a diversion or something that's different than, you know, defense strategies that we've seen even from Trump 1 and Biden. And so, I mean, readiness and these considerations that you just outlined, you know, coming from the vice president as well, like these have always been considerations for any conflict, right? Like regardless of the adversary. And they're, you know, particularly more acute now given the drawdown of stocks to arm Ukraine. I mean, that was sort of a situation that sort of landed in the Trump administration's lap when they came in. And it's something that we have to grapple with because, you know, we are subject to trade-offs and we are subject to scarcity. I think that's something that maybe the U.S. isn't as comfortable admitting all of the time.
It's
but
terrifying.
I think we have to. Yeah. Especially with China on the rise, you know? I mean, that's a consideration. And so, but certainly, right, like regardless of whether it's China or Iran, readiness and the implications to our munitions is like a critical component of the conversation that seems to have been, I mean, it's definitely been reported by the media, but maybe it's been missing from other segments, including Capitol Hill.
So are our stockpiles being depleted at an alarming rate? Because reading the stories, the concerns are being expressed. But when I see concerns being expressed, the skeptic in me says, oh, hell, it's actually worse than what's being reported.
No, a totally fair, reaction to have. I think based on, a lot of this is behind the classified curtain, but from publicly reported numbers based on, production reports from the defense primes, I think it was the Royal United Services Institute and then CSIS here that most recently put out some reporting and some projects on the state of our stockpiles. And if you look at some of our most exquisite munitions that we need, primarily, we need them in the Indo-Pacific, but right now in the conflict with Iran, they are what is essentially defending us in the Gulf, in our bases in the Gulf, Patriot, THAAD interceptors. I mean, the numbers that they've put out publicly in these reports, if true, and if it reflect what's actually, inside the building, I would certainly be concerned about our ability to do, anything to continue to, prosecute this campaign. But then also, if Taiwan got hot tomorrow, I think that'd be a real challenge for us.
Well, that's something that's probably inevitably going to come up in the conversations between President Xi and Trump in the next 2 weeks if that visit to China is still on the schedule. But Elise, I want to turn to some of the breaking news that we got last night, which is that Iran had submitted a 14-point response to the U.S. proposal to end the war that President Trump went on to promptly dismiss. But here are some of the demands that were listed by the Iranian outlets, which includes guarantees against future military aggression, the withdrawal of U.S. forces from Iran's periphery, an end to the naval blockade, the release of frozen Iranian assets, the payment of reparations, the lifting of sanctions, an end to the fighting in Lebanon, and a new mechanism governing the Strait of Hormuz. But noticeably missing from that list is obviously the central issue, the biggest point of contention that has long been the issue here, which is the enrichment of uranium, Iran's ability to have access to a nuclear weapon. Give us a status update on what you make.
Essentially, pretty much the proposal that's been floating around for some time. The thing that's new right now is that the Iranians want to separate the nuclear negotiations from the Strait of Hormuz negotiations. They want to first, let's figure out the Strait of Hormuz. Let's get this all straightened out. You end your naval blockade. We'll open the Strait of Hormuz. And then we can negotiate on the nuclear program. So they're saying, we'll give you a timeline for negotiations on the nuclear program. We remember that this problem with the Strait of Hormuz wasn't there before the war. But now this is, for Iran right now, obviously the nuclear has, been the one that everybody's focused on. But the Strait of Hormuz has always been there. Yeah. It didn't appear on February 28th. Now the Iranians are like, aha, we have this card and we're going to play it.
But that feels like an implicit acknowledgement from Iran that the blockade might be working, right?
If they're is willing. Working.
And in that case, why would Donald Trump agree to this, right?
Well, for the same reason that the global economy is being severely affected, not just oil prices, not just when we fill up our tanks at the gas pump.
Oh, and I did yesterday, and my eyes are still
No, we're not taking
rolling.
any road trips anytime soon, right? We're all reconsidering that. But look, we all talk about this. It's supply chains, it's fertilizer, it's everything that you could imagine. And this could be going on for some time. And so what basically neither side wants to capitulate because they think it's weakness and they think someone's going to, blink first. It's a game of chicken of the two blockades. And so the thought is if they could settle that, then you can turn to negotiations. Guys, this takes patient diplomacy. Remember, it took 2 years.
We talk about this on the show all the time.
Exactly.
Right?
And this administration is not known for that, especially the president, for that patient kind of diplomacy. These negotiations, the Obama deal, took 2.5 years to go into effect because it's technical. These nuclear negotiations are very technical. So it's going to take a long time. But when you hear from Iran, there's a new plan, or we're expecting that this will happen again. We're going to get more strikes. We're preparing for further strikes. These are all just, this is all rhetoric. I just look at whether these negotiations can go somewhere. The president likes to say he's a deal maker. He's a negotiator. What can he give the Iranians to open up the strait and start negotiating in earnest on the nuclear program, which I think the Iranians, they may not give him everything, but they're prepared to at least start.
Do that. You talk about rhetoric. Let's listen to President Trump's rhetoric, some of the denials about whether or not the United States might be better off making a deal or not.
Frankly, maybe we're better off not making a deal at all. Do you want to know the truth? Because we can't let this thing go on. Been going on too long.
President, last night you said we might be better off not making a deal with Iran.
Well, I wouldn't have to. I didn't say that. I said that if we left right now, it would take them 20 years to rebuild. But we're not leaving right now. We're going to do it so nobody has to go back in 2 years or 5 years.
What you just watched was the president saying something, being asked about it, and him saying he didn't say that. That happens a lot in this administration.
But Let's just be clear.
Y'all heard him say it with the ears. Catherine, how does an administration operate when you have the president kind of giving, I don't know if mixed signals it even covers it, confusing, confounding, completely inaccurate signals in public all the time, right? Because a lot of the work that Elise is talking about happens behind closed doors. And you know, if you're a negotiator, I've never negotiated before, other than, you know, marriage, I guess. Other than the negotiations that happen in my house, you want it to happen behind closed doors, and any external activity complicates it. The president does that every single day. How are the folks in the Defense Department, how are the folks in the State Department handling that?
Yeah, I mean, I think my perspective from a staffer, right, having been inside the building, I've been a staffer on Capitol Hill before. A lot of it is, right, like we have to respond to the principal. And in this case, you have a principal, who is definitely not making it easier on the people behind the scenes who are doing the work. But I think that's like it's a staffing response, right? You have to be able to come back with like really strong messaging and like obviously present some sort of like unified position.
So if you were in the Defense Department today and you heard this, how would you and your colleagues respond? What would happen behind the scenes?
I mean, I'd be thinking about a lot of issues, but I think one of the ones that's top of mind, right, is, you know, would this be a resumption of hostility? Like, if we aren't able to make a deal, is there a resumption of hostilities on the horizon? How are we going to, like, deal with the Hill?
What's the plan we give them?
Well, and what's the Hill, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, the secretary was just before the committees, said we're in a pause, the pause is the 60-day clock, which I don't think is correct. But, you know, I think that's going to be, that would be one issue top of mind based on the rhetoric. Like, where do we go from here, depending on how this plays out?